Welcome to the Paddy Wagon, episode 13. That's a magic number, isn't it, Micah?
It is.
And when I was making the graphic for this, I thought it's very interesting that this is episode 13. We're on today. Addy and I are on today with Micah Dank, author, researcher into astrotheology and other things.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about astrotheology. Can I pronounce it? Astrotheology and how you take research that you've uncovered. And
the 13. The 13. The reason it's an unlucky number, the reason that floors in Manhattan don't have it, it goes back to October 13th, 1307, when the Knights Templar were killed.
Or arrested. That's what the date that they were arrested, right?
Right.
Because it took them a couple of years to it's to get rid of them. And
Pope sent them after them. Yeah.
Yeah, and burned them at the stake too, as I remember. Anyway, so Micah you're an author. I know you've got two books that I know of. The Rabbit Hole. Do you have other books also?
It's Into the Rabbit Hole, and it's 6 books right now, and I have the 7th and 8th with the publisher right now.
Okay, very good. And then you also have a YouTube channel where you talk about astrotheology.
I do. You have to search Micah Dank. It doesn't always populate right away, so you really have to look for it.
Right. And Dank is such a dank name. Like,
it is a dank name.
How did you get such a great internet name?
I don't know. It's my birth name.
You can pick your friends and you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your parents. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
I get up with Dank.
So Addy, you got any questions for Micah before we dig into it?
Well, I interviewed Mike a couple weeks ago now, and he took my show through the first half of one of his presentations. But we're gonna kind of ask, I think, Micah how he got into this work a little bit, which I think Peter was interested in.
Indeed, yeah. So how did you get started? I mean, what brought you to the point? I mean, there's other people like Richard Grove was late to a meeting at One World Trade Center, and we're going to talk to him about that next week. Mm-hmm. And that kind of changed his frame for looking at the world. What changed your frame?
So what is it, 2012? So about 10 years ago, I was working in logistics, and I had one of my clients offered me a job in Boston. And I was living with this girl at the time, who I'm no longer with, and she got a job in Boston too. So we picked up and moved to Boston. So while we were there, we didn't have a lot of friends really there yet. So she spent time watching TV, and I think the iPad just came out around that time. So I would be on the iPad and I'd be going down rabbit holes. And I came across a video from Jordan Maxwell, just happenstance, and it kind of blew my mind away. And then I started diving deep into it, and then one of my friends sent me a video by Santos Bonacci, and I've learned everything from those two. And I just studied them for hours and hours and hours. I watched everything that I could of theirs. I studied them for hours and hours. Then when I felt like I had a grasp on it, I started reading the Bible, and I started, looking at ancient texts, and I was reading the book differently. I was seeing connections and cross signs and neighboring signs and all sorts of intermittent signs that I could find in it. So it really blew my mind. So I decided I wanted to do that for a living. So I started writing my first book. which was the title was actually not Into the Rabbit Hole. The original title was Decoding the Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was the title for the first book, and I was only planning on doing one. But then when my friend read it, he was like, "You got to keep going. You got to make this a series. You got to do something with it." So one became two, two became three, three became six, six became eight, and yeah, I mean that's basically what I had done, and I knew that just the combination of esoteric information, like Dan Brown, I bit off of Dan Brown's style in writing, you know, with the cryptograms and the stuff. You know, I love his writing. I love his the way he presents information, and I wanted to do the same thing. My characters are a little different. They're young, they're wise asses. There's a lot of humor in it, you know, for young people. It's basically a way to soft red pill people when you read the books, because you build this world with this fiction world.
Mm-hmm.
And the way it works when you read is that if I were to write a nonfiction book, it would just pigeonhole a small number of people. But if I'm writing a fiction series, you know, with all this fringe science, fringe medicine, fringe politics, then basically I would.
You write about a lot of medical stuff in the first book.
I do. I keep going with that too.
Were you in medical school, or do you have friends?
No,
or
I
family?
wasn't. I have family in it, but I write a lot about that. I have a character that's a psychologist, so I talk about psychology. I have a character that's a physics teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So I talk about quantum physics and physics. I've got another character that later in the series, she's a graduate from MIT,
Right.
Computer programming, and all these characters, they all work together. Like the story blends it together, whereas they rely on each other to solve everything. Now, interestingly enough, my book series, the names for the characters and the names of the places they go are all anagrams. So when you figure out
like Nabokov.
Yeah.
I think
So
Vivian Darkblue, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So when you figure out the anagrams, it tells a whole different story.
Interesting. Well, now I have to go back.
What is Nabokov, for those who don't know?
Vladimir Nabokov is a famous author. He wrote, most famous for Lolita. And Lolita, wait, hang on. I thought I put this on Do Not Disturb.
It is the time of the season.
I can't make this go away. I can't talk at the moment. And it won't stop. There. I put it on Do Not Disturb. The only person who can disturb me is my daughter, so that's who's disturbing me. Vladimir Nabokov, he was a Russian royalty. He escaped from Russia in the Russian Revolution. He spoke 5 languages. English was his 5th language. I think that Lolita arguably is one of the best written American English language books ever written. But it's got double and triple and quadruple entendres. The best way to consume that book is a book called by another author named Alfred Appel called The Annotated Lolita, where he deep dives on all of the anagram names and double entendres in Russian and French and things like that. So, and he was contemporary with Stanley Kubrick. Stanley Kubrick famously made Lolita into a movie, which I think is arguably Kubrick's worst film, because the book is written as a first-person narration. That is, the main character, Humbert, whatever you want to call him, talks or is describing in the book what he's thinking for the first half of the book. And
which is much like what I do.
Well, writing books are the appropriate medium for writing stories about what people are thinking.
Correct.
Yeah. And movies are the appropriate medium for what people are doing. And so the only way to actually make Lolita into a book that which would honor the story would be if there was a voiceover. if Humbert's character was doing a voiceover.
Right.
But motion picture studios don't like to do voiceover movies. So and the problem with it is that if I digress into Lolita for 1 second, is that in Lolita he has all of these lurid thoughts about Lolita for the first half of the book, but he doesn't do anything. And so it's only when his wife, who is Lolita's mother, discovers his diary that any of the ideas that he's had in his head are revealed to another person in the story. That is, the entire story goes on inside of his head until that diary is revealed. And so there's a lot of humor in the movie because, you know, the thoughts that go through Humbert's head are not unlike the thoughts that go through anyone's head. And the difference between a pervert and somebody who just has dirty thoughts is kind of by degrees as far as social norms are concerned, right? And so it's very difficult without making Lolita into a narrated film to do that without making Humbert just look like more of a pervert than he actually is.
Yeah, I actually started figuring out that that's the case. I don't know if you know that my first book's been my screenwriter has turned it into a screenplay, has adapted it to a screenplay. And my publicist is actually in 2 weeks pitching it to TV producers. We're going to start pitching this series to try and get it out there. But you're not kidding. Like, there has to be, because you can't just have a rambling dialogue, you know, because it doesn't translate to the movies. People need to get hit in the head with action all the time.
Right.
And so it kind of like dumbs down the esoteric a little bit, but I'm going to try and see if we can find a way to keep
there's a really good little book. I'll have to put it on my book list on the Duke Report. I have a list of books on my website, the Duke Report, called Thinking in Pictures by John Sayles. And he's a writer-director, does independent films. And I think the book is only about 90 pages long, but it's really good at explaining how to take ideas and turn them into pictures. So I highly recommend that book. So we went off on the Lolita direction for a second. What were we talking about before that, Addy?
You were just talking about Micah's starters, awakening nexus, and how that transformed. He just moved to Boston. And what year was that, Micah? That
it was
happened?
2012, 2013. So I've been studying the Bible for about 30 years. I've been studying the astrotheology angle of it for about 10. And I've really been starting to put together, I've really been out in the circuit doing podcasts and, you know, trying to make a name for myself for the last, I think my first podcast was June 30th, 2020. So it hasn't been 2 years yet, you know, but I've done over 300 shows, you know, and I'm just trying to get all this information out there.
Well, you say all this information. I mean, there's a lot of information. I don't know if you study the work of Robert Edward Grant. Are you familiar with him?
No.
So he's a guy. His story is that he was a Fortune. Lost Addy there for a second. He was a Fortune 500 CEO. He was a CEO at Allergan, which is the company that makes soft contact lenses and Botox. And apparently somebody tried to finagle him in a $50 million deal one day, and he said, you know what, I've had enough of this, and he resigned, and he went off and he became a mathematician. And he uses Instagram as his platform, but he's a polymath, and he speaks, I think, 8 languages fluently, and he's a mathematician. And he's made significant mathematical breakthroughs in the last couple of years on Instagram.
I love it.
And one of the things that he just tweeted out the other day is that he's got this hypothesis that 1 is the only constant. Only the way that he's spelling 1 is the word phi, is the letter phi, which is a 0 with a line through it.
Yeah. I just put phi into my my latest book.
Yeah, so phi, pi, and the constant e spell 1 if you look at them as English letters. So if you take the Greek letters. So, he also has been working the math on the Tetragrammaton,
Right.
which he contends maybe, and he's got math to back it up. The math formula: pi times 7 over pi to the 7th power. So if you look at the Hebrew letters, you can. In fact, I could probably put them in the comments here. Let me
Well, the Hebrew alphabet is not actually it's not actually a language. It's a code. The letters are actually codes.
right.
Um,
Or
it's not actually-
or
it's not clear.
or sigils, right?
Yeah.
So so like I said, the math thing, the Bible thing, the calendar thing, the astrology thing, and then the kind of weird end times that seem to be kind of mimicking or beginning times. I guess it's the end of Pisces, the beginning of Aquarius, right?
End of Aquarius. I think Pisces is after Aquarius.
No, it's
Or I'm sorry. Is that the case?
We're in Aquarius now. We just left Pisces.
Yeah, we just left Pisces, and the reason is that in the precession of the equinox, I think you know how when you spin a top, how it spins around. It's somehow I think it goes backwards, right?
Yeah.
The
Precession goes backwards, whereas when you're going through the months, it goes forwards: Aquarius, Pisces, Aries. The precession goes Aries, Pisces, Aquarius, so it does go back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, so people are going, well, what does this have to do with anything, Peter? Why are you talking about this stuff? Well, because when I first started to look at astrology this way, the idea of using it as fortune telling never kind of like rang true to me. But when you start to kind of investigate the secret societies and the mystery schools, the idea that the people who are behind the curtain running things are using these things basically as a calendar,
Right.
to schedule events.
Yep.
That makes total sense. And when you start to realize that this world that we live in, whether or not you think it's 8 spheres or an infinite universe or whatever it is, a torus, whatever it is, that it winds up being a clock, then it makes sense that people are making appointments, right?
Yep.
And they're are you familiar with the work of Martin Armstrong?
I usually stay into my neck of the woods as far as like astrotheology. Like I haven't really read into Caesarian or any of those kind of guys.
Martin Armstrong is a finance guy and a computer programmer who discovered certain patterns in the stock market that were based on mathematical equations. And of course, if you think of astrology as math,
Right.
then you can kind of like back into it. And but he contends that he wrote a computer program that allows him to predict events and the market, and it became so accurate that people wanted it from him, and he wound up spending 9 years in prison. There's a great movie called The Forecaster about him. And what's really interesting is in the first couple of years that he was in prison, Darren Aronofsky's first film came out, which is Pi, which is basically somebody who's roughly doing the exact same thing that you're familiar with that film, right?
Yes.
Yeah, because that
Well,
film
you don't need they always. So the stock market always crashes in Libra. If you ever look into that, October 1907, the panic of 1907. October 24th, 1929 was the crash of 29. That's the handover date of Scorpio, by the way. October 19th, 1987, Black Monday. October 13th, 1989, Friday the 14th mini crash. October 9th, 2002, stock market downturn of 2002. And yet, coincidentally, all the largest daily point gains come from Aries. So you really can predict things.
And if you measure the peaks between those things or the depressions between those things, I think that Martin Armstrong found out that there's a relationship with pi to those dates. So whether or not you're measuring it in hours or days or I can't remember what the functions are.
Why do you think that is, Micah? Why is it that happens during those time periods?
Well, in astrotheology, Libra is the scales. Right? So it's the justice. So there's key words that you look for. like judge, judgment, justice. Jesus is called the just one. That's when the sun is in Libra. Um, there's things in Libra like the justice, the judgment. So we're basically all being judged, is what it is. And the reason it climbs in Aries is because Aries is the start of the new year. It's the Passover, which means three separate things. The Passover in Judaism is when the angel of death passes over all the Jews that don't have the lamb or the ram. Aries being the ram's blood smeared on their doorposts. Their firstborn son gets killed. In Christianity, the Passover is the resurrection. It's Easter. It's God's son resurrecting from the dead. It's the resurrection of God's son. So you have the Passover, and Easter, all in Aries. So that's when it comes up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Go ahead.
if that's judgment, and I couldn't help but notice your G. Is that because are you an original gangster, or are you a Mason? Are you trolling?
No, I'm a Mason.
You're a Mason?
And I'm actually teaching these people all this stuff because none of them have any idea. Believe it or not. Like if I was out there as a Mason, like handing over secrets, it would be one thing because there's like penalties for that. But like, this is all new to them. You know, I'm giving lectures all over the place about my work and all this stuff in astrology.
That's interesting. So you're feeding them information. They're not feeding you information.
No, it's the other way around. We're both feeding information.
Interesting.
Why did you join the Freemasons?
So when you join, and incidentally, you can literally just apply. It's like the CIA. You hand in an application, then they vet you. They do a background check. You have to believe in God to join, and when you're in there, there's a lot that has to do with praying to God. It's a lot of brotherhood and charity work. That's basically what it is. You know, there's a really big stigma against it. You know, and I'm thinking by being out there and open as one. You know, people reach out to me all the time to talk about it. They want to know questions, and I answer them the best that I can. But it's not a secret. It's not a secret society. It's a society that has secrets. That's all it is.
What is your understanding of their objective and what their aim is?
I mean, there's a hierarchy. You know, there's a hierarchy. That's what the Mason aprons are for. There's a hierarchy, and what it is it's just it's a brotherhood. And you do a lot of charity work. That's basically what I use it for.
Who would you recommend join, and who would you not recommend join? And then also, that's the Christian God that they hold beliefs to. Is that correct?
It's just God. It's just God in general. You have to believe in God. It doesn't matter what religion you're in. And I mean, I'm in there talking against religion. You know, I'm talking against religion, but I do believe in God. But yeah, that's
what is your understanding of God?
It's a combination of two things, I think. It's my own understanding. I believe that God is infinite and nothing exists outside of infinity. So we all have a spark of God within us. And, you know, in the Bible, it'll say the kingdom of heaven is within you. You know, Genesis 32:30, you know, Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, which is pineal. So it tells you the Bible is also anatomical as well as astrological. It's a combination of that mixed with what Einstein said. Are you guys familiar with what Einstein said about Spinoza?
No.
I think I heard you talk about it the other day, and
Can you share it with us, Michael?
What Einstein said about Spinoza is it's basically like in the book of Thomas where Jesus says, "Split a piece of wood, and I'm there. Lift up a stone, and you'll find me." It's the idea that God doesn't want you to put on a suit and go pray as loud as you can in a cold room with people. He doesn't want you to do that. In fact, in the Bible, it specifically says that those who pray the loudest or give charity in publicly, they, what is it called? The way he says it is he says they will have their reward, as in being seen is big enough for you. That's what you get out of it. But Spinoza's God says, you know, go out into the mountains, go out into, you know, go explore, look at this land that I made for you, look at this water that I made for you. So it's kind of like a combination of both. Like, Peter, do you have kids?
I do.
Okay, so basically, they are literally half of you, right? They
Yep.
literally have your DNA. They're literally half of you, right? So they're a part of you, like we're a part of God. But you also experience them as separate from you.
Right.
Like you teach them things, you watch them learn, you know, things like that. That's how I feel God is. I feel that at the beginning, God had infinite of everything, and the reason He created us was so He could experience Himself in billions of different ways.
Well, and that's kind of a Rosicrucian Gnostic frame, I think. Scott Adams wrote a book called God's Debris, which kind of lifts some 15th century Rosicrucianism, where the conceit is that in order for God to prove that God is almighty to God, that the only thing that God can do is destroy God to see if God is reformed as God, and that the universe that we live in is the universe of that destroyed God that is trying to reconstitute itself.
Well, that's the idea, is that God splits Himself into a piece of a soul, sends you down to earth, blank slate. Not all. There's a phrase in the Bible where they talk about some will drink more from the cup than others. Okay, and that has to do with the fact that you have memories of everything, and then when you kind of pass through the cup, you take a sip and you forget everything. It's a metaphor. And then when you're born, you have nothing. You're brand new. You learn things, and you spiritually evolve to a certain place, and then when you pass on based upon how you've evolved on Earth and how you did, you'll go to a place where you'll further your learning. So it's basically a rebirth. Death is just the birth.
Right. So contextualize this for me, because I think I understand, but I don't want to guess. And that is so you believe in God,
Right.
okay? But you don't. I understand you don't believe in religion, but you are using the Bible as some kind of a reference for.
Correct.
And
well, it's not just the Bible. It's not just the Bible. It's the Quran. It's
right.
the Egyptian
Yeah. You're using the ancient texts.
Right.
And where do you think morality comes from? Where do you think the sense of right and wrong? And how do you think how do you think it's manifested and passed down to us?
Well, it's nurture versus nature is what it really boils down to. It's the story of the two kids. One grew up an alcoholic, one didn't, because their father was an alcoholic, and they both said it was because I saw my father drink. Why they do what they do, sort of thing. So I think you're taught your morals. As you get older, you can and you get to know people very, very well. Once your frontal lobe fully forms, I think like when you start to hit 30, there's a reason you could only be a teacher when you hit 30. In the ancient religions,
right?
Once you start to hit 30 and you can really break down people's personalities, you can see where they got influenced from. If you meet their parents, you see where they get it from, and then you see how they're not like them. So I think we all have an internal clock, an internal personality that makes us do certain things. But I think a lot of it is nature and nurture.
Well, I don't know. When you say nature versus nurture, I mean, if the Third Reich weren't destroyed, when it was, you might have had a whole generation of people who thought that it was okay to go murder people. And there's an argument that we're living through that now.
Yeah, actually, the founding fathers came up with a vote, and I think it was shy by a couple of votes. They almost made German the national language of America.
Okay, but that said, the again, the question that I have that I don't know if it's being answered or not is how does that manifest itself? How does God manifest morality on us, or does God manifest morality on us at all? Or are we on our own to try to figure that out?
I think that it's an interesting question. Like, where does good begin and where does evil begin?
Yeah, I mean, I always frame. I mean, people who are atheists, and I think people who call themselves atheists, it's interesting because it takes just as much faith to call yourself as an atheist as it takes to say you're a believer, that you believe in
Yeah.
God. But the question that I always have back for them, and excuse my reductionism, because a lot of times I find things more complicated and I try to make things a little simpler, is just like what sets the moral compass? Like what does one person?
I don't think there is one, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't think there is one, because what's moral in one place is not moral in another place.
So you don't think that people are born good per se?
No.
Mhm.
You have
It has to
you have control mechanisms like the Ten Commandments, for example,
Mhm.
that try and keep people in line. However, if you do your research, you'll find that the Ten Commandments go back to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, chapter 125. You can literally read them there. Everything is borrowed from something previous, and what's moral in one place is not moral in another place. And the reason evil exists, I believe, is because we have free will. You have the decision to act bad and face consequences or not face consequences. But in all my studying and all the esoteric sciences that I've ever done, the only thing that I've been able to, how they say, I think, therefore I am, is the only thing that you can really prove?
Descartes, right?
Yeah, Descartes, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I would make the argument that karma is the only true thing. Because what you see with these, with what you always see, like at the end of the day, it'll happen in an hour, it'll happen at the end of your life. Karma is real, okay? And the reason that the elites do what they do, where they show us all this stuff that they're doing through hypnotic television or movies or music, hand symbols, all that kind of stuff. I do a thing on Illuminati hand symbols. The reason they show us all this is because if they show it to us, then they believe it offsets their karma. It's called revelation of the method. They're supposed to show us what they're doing, and that offsets the karma, because karma is real. Karma is the one true thing that I've found in the universe that I could say exists.
Well, that's the best explanation of revelation of the method that I've heard. It makes total sense. And for people who are out there who want an example, it's like in every James Bond movie, the James Bond villain always tells James Bond what he's about to do right before he tries to kill James Bond, and then for some reason James Bond winds up getting away. In Goldfinger, famously, James Bond says something. He's strapped down on a table, and Goldfinger's trying to cut him in half with a laser. And he goes, "Are you expecting me to talk,
Yeah.
Goldfinger?" And Goldfinger goes, "No, I expect you to die, Mr.
Yeah.
Bond."
I was just going to bring that up. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the great scenes in all James Bond movies.
But
Do
that's
you
what they
believe
have.
in karma, Peter?
Yeah, I believe. Look, I
You do?
believe that. I believe that there's if you whatever you put out into the world, you get back. And if you put bad stuff out into the world, again, my question is, where does bad come from? But
Well,
if
if you
you're
hold on a second, if you
Yeah.
go to Isaiah 45:7 in the Bible,
okay,
you must think it's hysterical that like I spend all my time decoding the Bible, and yet here I am quoting it a bunch of times.
no,
No, okay, good.
no.
Isaiah
My
45.
my fiance is a Catholic, and she reads me Bible passages every morning, and uh, I listen intently because I follow people like you, and I read stuff like this, like you're into all the time, and I'm always trying to contextualize what she's reading with all of the different layers, and I think that was one of the other questions that I had once you've finished, is that like well, let me let you finish, and then I'll ask you the question.
So it's important to understand is that I do have a grasp on the astrological aspect, and I've been able to find things within them, within history, within society. I have been able to decode, things in the Bible. My 8th book is done. My series is now done. So my publisher has book 7 and 8, and my children's book. I have a children's book coming out for 6 to 11-year-olds in astrology. It's called A is for Aries. So I figured, there's not that big of a market for that, or there is, but nobody's really writing them. So I wrote one with my astrologer. But the Bible is made up of 7 sciences. It's metaphysical, astrological, which I follow, anatomical, alchemical, spiritual, esoteric, and mythology. The Bible is not, however, literal historical reality or original.
Is
And
that
I
an
found-
anagram also?
No.
Okay.
But that's basically what I do. So I have 1/7 of the puzzle, and I don't even have the whole puzzle of
Right.
that 1/7. You know, I'm not out here saying that I'm the new Jesus Christ, that I figured something out. You know, I'm just some guy from Long Island that figured out some stuff.
Right.
And I'm using my English degree to basically write stories to try and push it to the masses, which is original in my community, because all the great thinkers that you see in our research community, they publish nonfiction. And I decided to look at 1984, Brave New World, Animal Farm, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I've studied these in college with my degree. And I noticed that people talk about things if they're in fiction. And then you also get plausible deniability. I don't know if you know this, Peter, if you're interested in continuing to read my books, but book 4 I wrote in 2017. It came out in 2020. I wrote it in 2017. I put a disclaimer at the beginning of it saying that I wrote it in 2017. The plot of the book is that there's a jellyfish in Japan called the Irukandji jellyfish. Have you heard me speak about this?
No.
There's a jellyfish in Japan called the Irukandji jellyfish. And what it does, unlike other jellyfish, is when this jellyfish stings you, okay, one of the side effects, aside from a red sore and all that stuff, is it leaves you with an impending sense of doom to the point where you beg the doctors to kill you.
That's like when I smoke weed.
Until it flushes itself out of the system. So the plot of this is that and again with anagrams, you can figure out which group started this in my book. One of these very powerful organizations weaponized that protein that does that, and they put it in the global flu vaccine that was mandated. And so what happens is people would get the flu shot.
This is in your book, or this is in real life?
This is my book that I wrote in 2017.
Okay. And
then, they get injected with this, and then little by little, it's like Bird Box. They just start killing themselves.
Well, yeah, that's incredibly interesting and poignant and topical, and it makes me so now I'll have to go read the books. I think that they're targeted at people younger than I am, though, aren't they? It seems that they're targeted.
I mean,
they're young adult, I think.
They're young adult. Well, the thing is that the topics that I talk about are incredibly esoteric and very cutting edge science and stuff. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The characters' conversation, how they talk to one another, how they goof off, they're joking with each other. They're immature. I always said that if Robert Langdon was a young, immature, drunk wise ass, that would be my main character, Graham. And yes, it is for a little younger office. I mean, a younger. I don't think there's an age range for it, because there's a lot of people older than me that are into this kind of humor. It's naughty humor, and these are conversations that I normally. Sometimes in the books, they're just conversations that I had with my friends or my wife.
Right. I found some of the banter a little juvenile, but Well,
it is. That's the idea, but that's how you draw people in. You draw people in, and before they know it, they're starting to question what MK Ultra is.
Right, exactly. And I want to talk about that in a second. But Bruce Gustafson has a funny question here. He said, Micah, do you think Pope Francis is a Mason? As people are suggesting. I've heard that he's a Jesuit.
He's a Jesuit.
He's a Jesuit.
He's a Jesuit. Yeah. He's not a Mason. He's a Jesuit. The Jesuits basically run everything. The Black Pope heads it all. In fact, they just switched them.
Who's the new Black Pope?
Adolfo Nicholas, I believe.
Yeah. So there's one. I gave a hard copy of your book to my daughter, and I listened to the Audible version. And there was one section where you did about 5 pull quotes in a row about the Jesuits, and I'd like to hear what you think about the Jesuits for a minute. But the question that I have after that would be, well, actually, why don't you talk about the Jesuits, and then I'll tell you what the next question is.
So the Jesuits have been running things since Ignatius de Loyola. You have Loyola College, you have Xavier College.
My dad went to Loyola, yeah.
Yeah, you have Xavier College, Georgetown, You know, these are all Jesuit schools.
Mm-hmm.
Gonzaga too, isn't it?
Gonzaga, yeah.
And it's weird because I live in a Methodist neighborhood, and I don't know what that has to do with anything. But keep going.
No, it doesn't. It's just, you know, that's just.
I live in this weird neighborhood where every street is named for a Methodist college. I don't understand why, but it just is. So anyway, keep talking about the
Right.
Jesuits.
So the Jesuits are actually, Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope. Okay, he's the first Jesuit pope, and he's Polish too, and he is run by the Black Pope, Adolfo Nicholas, who in turn is run by what's called the Pink Pope, who is Pepe Orsini, who's the head of the Orsini family. See, there's 13 families that rule everything.
Right.
And it might be more than that. There might be more than that at this point, but there's basic 13 families. Like your Rothschilds and your Rockefellers aren't even part of this. Like they're not even though the Rothschilds run the money and the Rockefellers run the education. That's why it's been dumbed down so much over the last 100 years. In fact, Rockefeller famously said when he started getting involved in public education and started financing it, he said, I don't want a nation of thinkers. I want a nation of workers.
Right.
Yes.
You know?
Yep.
Well, that makes sense. Addy and I were talking in a previous video about the fact that the people who really run things are probably people whose names we've never heard of and who we never see on television.
Yeah. You're never going to see them. You're never going to hear from them. And you know what the problem is that there's traps in society that no matter who tries to break through, there's already a trap in society to basically demonize that person. You know what I'm saying? Like basically, like
Can you expand?
Yeah, in the conspiracy community, right? If I were to say to an everyday person that the Rothschilds are evil, they'll just come at me and say, you hate Jewish people. You know, there's traps and there's things in place to make sure that things stay the same. You know, when that's not the case at all. The truth of the matter is that there's assholes in every group. Yeah. There's assholes in the LGBT group. There's assholes. There's assholes in Masonry. You know, there's assholes everywhere. You know, you treat people accordingly. You know?
Yeah. What's your understanding of Jewish people?
I mean, I was raised Jewish. In a conservative household. And I never took to it. Never believed it. My dad believes the Bible as it is, or the Old Testament. But something interesting happened when I was 9 years old, and I'm no longer friends with this kid anymore because of my work. I was friends with him for 30 years. I was his best man at his wedding. He would spend every birthday with me, and he's a born-again Christian now, and he just doesn't talk to me because of my work. But one of my best friends, Paul, moved into the neighborhood when I was 9 years old, and his family were born-again Christians, and my dad being a conservative Jew, like I would constantly see the struggle every time I would go there to hang out, or he would just constantly try and fill me with his, like it was almost bad or naughty to read the New Testament or anything. And I didn't take to any of that, you know, but at the same time, had I not been birthed to these two parents, I would not have had the drive to do what I do now. So I think what it boils down to is if you're happy with who you are, then you have to realize you're a culmination of everything before you. You know, you have to realize that. You know, I wouldn't be doing what I do if it wasn't for, and my family thinks I'm nuts. You know, my sister doesn't talk to me because of my politics. My dad thinks I'm crazy. And my mom's the only one, and she's
my sister, who is gay, got offended because I told her I unregistered to vote after January 6th because I was there on January 6th and I was working for Stop the Steal and I was there with Alex Jones and all those people, and I just unregistered to vote because I decided that elections are fake and gay. And my sister took great offense at the fact that I'm no longer political, but when I labeled myself non-political, I labeled myself gay. So sidebar, sorry.
Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to people, like I get attacked by Christians, and I have the same answer for them all the time. If your faith is strong in what you believe in, then what I'm talking about should have no bearing on you.
Yep.
You can dismiss me. You can think I'm evil. I've been called the Antichrist. You know how that feels?
Well,
called,
you're not a very good Antichrist for the Antichrist. I mean,
I've been called demonic. But yeah, if you're stable with your thought process, if you believe in what you believe in, it shouldn't be so flimsy that my beliefs should affect how you feel.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Question here, Micah. Do you know Taylor Marshall?
Dr. Taylor Marshall is a Catholic who struggles with Francis and does podcasts on him every day.
Oh, I didn't know. Another question: is Nimrod considered a spiritual grand master in England's lodges or U.S. lodges?
That is a no.
No. Okay. Who is Nimrod?
I can tell you that. I can tell you this because they do this.
Nimrod built the Tower of Babel. Addy.
Because it's because it's Masonic and it has to do with Masonry.
Okay.
You know, they call it God is called the Grand Architect of the universe, which makes sense. You know, when you think about it, like I always do this in my presentation, I talk about how the sun tells the hour of the day, the moon tells the day of the month, and the zodiac tells the month of the year. It's a perfect calendar in our little hole in the wall where we are in the universe, in the Milky Way. We have a perfect calendar that we look up at the sky, and we spent thousands of years figuring it out. You know, we take for granted that we have computer programs now, or we have a clock or a watch that can tell us what time it is. We know when it's going to get dark. We know when winter's going to come. We know when, spring is going to come. We know when our birthday is. You know, these people didn't have that back then. They had a sundial. They had to watch Horus in the sky. You know, we take that for granted. And what I talk about in my work is I say, listen, all these patterns and these codes that talk about different stars, this is to preserve the information. There's a great quote that I end with every single podcast that I want to share with you guys real quick. It's from John Dominic Crossan. And he says, my point once again is not that these ancient people told literal stories and we are now smart enough to take them symbolically, but that they told them symbolically and we are now dumb enough to take them literally. See, we don't give the ancient people enough credit for what they were able to write and how they were able to encode things, because we have something called chronological ethnocentrism, which is a social science term, which basically means that we think because we're the furthest along in time that we know of. I'm not going to get into metaphysics or quantum physics, okay? Let's just assume that because we're here, we're the furthest along in time, let alone the fact that, time is irrelevant outside of our dimension, and the past, future, and present are all happening at once. But we experience it in the time and the way that it is now, okay? We think that chronological ethnocentrism says that because they lived in the past, they didn't have as much information and they were dumb, and that's not true. We've been systemically dumbed down. The age of Pisces was known as the age of deception. It was when religion was supposed to rule. We're in the age of Aquarius right now. We're supposed to break free of religion. But the elites aren't trying to do that. Now, we left the age of Pisces December 21st, 2012, which was the end of the Mayan calendar. And if you read the Mayan calendar, it wasn't the end of the end of the world. It was the end of an age, the end of an era. That's the word used. And it's the same thing in the Bible, too. It's the end of an era. Well, each zodiac sign is an era. Okay, so we're in the age of Aquarius right now. That's the age where people are awakening. But just right on time, the elites got the one world religion headquarters trying to open up in Jerusalem right now.
How long will the age of Aquarius last?
So each sign, it's called the Great Year. There's 25,920 years to go through all 12 signs. You divide that by 12, you get 2160. So each sign is 2,160 years. And in my first book, I break down. See, that's the thing, Peter, that you don't get when you listen to my audiobooks is sometimes I have long descriptions, or I have I'm talking about certain passages, or I have pictures to show. So you don't really get to see that because they're not just going to describe it. But yeah, we're in it for 2160.
Well, I do have enough domain understanding. I've been looking at this stuff for, I don't know, 5 years now. So when people are talking to me about the Great Year, the precession of the equinox, or the Great Years, I get it. I understand. I understand the zodiac as a wave, and the ascendancy and the descendancy.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, so I have those pictures in my head, but but a lot of people may not.
Right.
So, so a couple other things I wanted to ask you. One is, and I think Addy and I were talking about this on our last show, and we talk about it all the time, and that is the concept of breaking through, right? Addy is a researcher. He's a independent journalist. He goes out. He was on the ground at the Ghislaine Maxwell trial, and
Which I'm very proud of you for, man. That took balls.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Micah. Appreciate
No,
that.
that took balls. Like I thought what I do took balls. Like we're gonna be in the same jail cell together.
Yeah.
I hope I have you as a cellmate rather than a chomo.
Yeah, it'll certainly be more entertaining, right?
Yeah, we'd have some great conversations. We get some writing done too. Well,
and I know how to juggle.
Oh, nice.
So
Sorry, Peter, go on.
So the question is that current events require a great deal of blocking and tackling. That is one of the things that, if you start to try to unpack the New World Order and you go all the way back to Cecil Rhodes and the Round Table, and in between you've got the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Royal Academy of Foreign, whatever the British Council on Foreign Relations is.
Right.
You've got, there's thousands of names and hundreds of organizations, and this thing has been going on for a long time.
Incidentally, did you know that in my first book, The Teacher, his name was William de Burgh? What do you get when you break that down?
Bilderberg.
Will I am. Oh.
It's Bilderberg.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have little nuggets in there.
Okay,
To add
it's
everything.
Bilderberg. Yeah. So anyway, and that's good, and that's good, because when you start to, like I said, it does become the rabbit hole, right? It becomes like the crazy thing, and people glaze over. Like I have Tragedy and Hope. I got 600 pages into Tragedy and Hope before I cut to Tragedy and Hope 101, which is the Cliff Notes version of Tragedy and Hope. Because
you didn't even have to do that. You could have just read Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist in 100 pages and gotten way further.
That's my favorite fiction book, The Alchemist.
Okay, well, let me write. Okay, tell me what that is.
It's about a shepherd boy who's trying to make his way in the world, and he meets, he gets like all the usual distractions. He meets and he also gets robbed, and he meets a girl, and it kind of talks about him trying to find his place in the world. It's really good book.
So
there's another book I can recommend to you.
Yeah,
there's two books I recommend. I recommend these three all the time. The Alchemist is one.
Yeah.
One is A Lawyer Presents the Case for the Afterlife.
Okay.
By Victor Zamet.
Okay.
And then the other one is
Don't say it.
Way of the Peaceful Warrior by Dan Millman.
Okay.
Okay, I should just watch the video again, and then I don't have to write it down. Anyway, the question that I had is that are we wasting our time trying to educate people about current events?
No, in fact, with the internet now, it's the best time to do it. The PSYOP against the internet. The PSYOP against the internet is disinformation. And I'm not talking about disinformation like they call right-leaning people who don't follow the narrative disinformation. I'm talking about people that literally post shit on the internet. Like, if you were to Google when Saturn was discovered, and you can use DuckDuckGo, you can use Google, you can use Brave. Right. They'll all say the same thing. 1610 by Galileo. But that's not true, because anybody who knows anything about ancient religions knows about the Saturnalia worship that happened thousands of years ago. Saturn was known as the second sun. It was known as the black planet.
Right.
Okay. But yet you Google it and it tells you 1610. So that's the disinformation right there.
It's also got a hexagon as a pentagon as a pole too, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's a hex. It's a hex.
Hex, right. Yeah.
It's a hex. It's at the top of the pole. Yeah. At the top of the planet.
Which is weird. Like, I never knew that before. Okay, so it's a good time to be telling the truth. The other kind of point that I was thinking, we were talking to Jason Burmis the other day, and there are certain things you're not allowed to say on YouTube. So the thing that people are being coerced into getting, Jason Burmis refers to as the boop boop. Likewise. Luke Rudkowski refers to it as a procedure. And so you've got people talking about boop boops and procedures instead of whatever the name is. And it reminds me very much of kind of like kind of Dark Ages occult writing where everything is encoded.
Yep.
Because if the wrong people find what you've written down, they're going to burn you at the stake. And,
why do you think they encoded everything into the Bible with astrology? It's the same reason.
right.
That's the sacred information. Do you know why my work I don't get banned? I have a YouTube channel. I don't get banned. I do podcasts, hundreds of podcasts. I don't get banned. It's because my work falls in line with what the left wants, which is to abolish religion, which is what I want. Okay, but I'm doing it in a very articulate and interesting way. I'm trying to use astrology to prove that the Bible's not real. And that's what I'm doing. So because my views technically line up with them, even though I don't,
Right.
they get a pass. That's why my stuff doesn't get taken down.
So let me ask you this question. So Oliver Stone did a interview with, he did a multi-part interview with Vladimir Putin. And at one point they're walking around the Dasha that I think was built by Tsar Nicholas. I don't think he ever lived in it. I think he built it and never moved in. Stalin lived in it for years, and there was a chapel in the middle of the Dasha that Stalin had ripped out. And when Putin moved in, he had the chapel rebuilt and put back in. And Oliver Stone asked him why he did that, and Putin said, "Well, in the Soviet Union, the state was the religion." And Oliver Stone said, "Yeah," and he said, "Well, when the Soviet Union fell." I put it back, and he said, "Well, why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, you can't have a vacuum." And so, if Putin's assumption is that you can't have a vacuum, if you're trying to get rid of religion, what do you assume it would be replaced with?
Well, I don't take him as a spiritual thought leader, but I do know.
You don't.
I know, but he is. I mean, look what he did with the rubles. Look what he did with the gold. You know, it's already recovered. You know, he is, and nobody wants to attack him because of the nukes. If you notice, the U.S. doesn't attack anybody that has nukes. They're never going to attack North Korea, never going to attack Russia. They just don't. You know?
Yep.
And Russia's basically in our backyard of Alaska. You know, I don't take him as a thought leader. I don't. You know, I doubt he knows half of what we know as far as like religion and astrotheology and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well,
but I'll tell you this much right now.
Yeah.
There's a church in a town in Israel called Megiddo. Okay, the town is called Megiddo. That's the root of Armageddon. Okay, that's where the town of Megiddo is where it's all supposed to happen, the final battle. So there's a church there. Okay, and some guy basically put his foot through the floor, and then when they pulled him out, they looked under it, and there was like a whole other church built on top of this church. So they dug up this church, and it's from the 200s, right? Now, the centerpiece mosaic in this church was the two-fish Pisces. See, they knew it at the time. They knew that it was the age of Pisces, that Jesus was the sun god of Pisces. I always tell people when I'm saying this, when I explain Christianity or Judaism to people, I go, look, imagine for a second that I'm back at the Greek Senate, right, or the Roman Senate, I'm back at the Greek time. Okay, 1,000, 2,000 years ago. And I'm at the Senate, and I'm trying to explain to them that Zeus is a metaphor. That's what it's like talking to people about Jesus these days.
Where can people find your work, Micah? How can they support you? Where can they buy your books?
So I'm on Twitter.
Left here.
I'm at Twitter at Real Mr. Dank, spell out Mr. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Micah Dank. Reach out to me on those platforms. You know, if you're interested in getting the book series, I sell signed copies. I will also hook you up with my YouTube channel, which I now have, which has all my work that I've decoded so far. You know, what I'm basically doing now is I have I have a large print, like a grandma Bible, like a large print Bible, and I'm reading through it every day and highlighting things, and then I'm gonna go through the whole Bible, you know, and I'm gonna break it down astrotheologically.
Interesting. Are you familiar with? I know that Addy's trying to wrap this up, but I just like had one more.
Yeah, yeah.
Alan Green is a guy who has decoded the cover of William Shakespeare's sonnets, and I guess Francis Bacon was in charge of the King James version of the Bible, and there's also I think a video on the that parallels Alan Green's work on the cover of the King James Bible and the things that are encoded in that. And I just thought if you weren't familiar with Alan Green's work, I can send you some links to the stuff that he
interesting
does.
thing too about the Bible is if you go to so the King James Bible came out in 1611. Okay,
2 years after the sonnets.
Right.
Yeah.
William Shakespeare would have been 46 years old. If you go to the Psalm 46, the 46th word from the top is shake, the 46th from the bottom is spear.
Right, but only in the King James.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. And
Wow.
and there's and the cover also has got all kinds of stuff encoded into it. And my guess is that if you use the Shakespeare codes that Alan Green has uncovered, there's all kinds of tells. I was talking to my fiance about this the other day. Jesus, in a lot of his quotes, he says, "Amen, amen."
Yeah.
And I wonder whether or not that's a bracket or something that there's, or that's a key.
Well, amen actually goes back to the worship of Amen Ra in the Egyptian times. Remember, everything is borrowed.
Yep.
Previous.
Yeah.
It's Amen Ra. When you say Amen in Judaism, it means "and so it be" or "so let it be," something to that effect.
Right.
Christianity, the same thing. But no, when you say Amen, you're actually praising Amen Ra.
Right. But just from a pure taxonomical standpoint, Jesus says amen twice. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't seem to make logical sense yeah, maybe he's being enthusiastic, but from a cryptological standpoint, I look at that stuff and I think, is that okay? Are they bracketing something here? Does that mean that you need to pay attention to what follows here in a different way? And of course, things that have been translated from Aramaic or Hebrew or Greek into English probably aren't going to work anyway. But
well, you got to understand too is that the Bible was written in Hebrew, right? The Old Testament was written in Hebrew, but everyone at the time knew that if you were an intellect, you wrote and read in Greek.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It all becomes very interesting. And then, like I said, then you add the layer of Greek symbols and math on top of that. And like I said, Robert Grant, his work is, phi, pi, e, which are all constants, spell out the word one. You get all kinds of crazy math things that
there's a guy you guys should have on your show. He does numerology better than anyone I've ever met, and he's very new to it. I will reach out to him. He's the Matrix Code. He's 1111 Matrix Code on Twitter.
Okay.
His name is Garrick. He's incredible. You guys should have him on. He does a presentation.
Yeah.
He breaks down numbers like I've never seen before, and he is so young into this. He's only been doing this for like a few years, but he's decoded some really serious patterns.
Well, Grant claims that he's broken public key encryption using geometry, and he published a paper on it, which is, again, opens another whole can of worms, right?
Yeah.
If encryption isn't really encrypted, what is that telling us about the people who sold it to us?
Yep.
Anyway, well, it's been terrific. You made my head explode a couple of times, and I'm sure that there's probably many more head explosions to come. Thank you for the work that you do. Thanks for showing up today.
Yeah,
and Addy, you got anything else?
No, yeah, same thing. Thank you, Mike, for coming on the show, and hopefully people throw him a follow and buy a book or two.
Yeah, throw me a follow. Listen, I talk to everybody. It is like thousands of people. I have like 1,000 conversations, 2,000 conversations between all the social platforms. But I keep all of them, so that if somebody randomly messages me in 6 months, I could just scroll back up and see what we were talking about, who this person was, and then I can continue the conversation. So I'm still at the point where I can do that.
Terrific. Well, thanks for joining us today, and for our audience, we thank you too.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. See you later.
Soon. Stay frosty.